all right. Welcome everyone to Saber Academy again. Here we are, another week down, and another week ahead of us. So we will keep doing these until the end is in sight, whatever end that may be. So we are now kind of at the end of what we call our 4 pillars in our system. Now, one thing we should talk about here just a little bit before we move on is the way that our system is set up, the way that other systems may be set up, and the reasons for these things and exactly what this is. And this kind of comes down to a core idea of what martial arts are, what they, all of that kind of thing. So if we're talking about an art, the martial arts, especially the way we think of them today, we think of them as a group of exercises and techniques and strategies and philosophies and stuff like that that are all geared towards some form of combat. Now, that's a good enough definition that we can work with, but we must always be cognizant of the fact that this is not always what martial arts was. Like, the way we experience today is the way we experience today, and a lot of that is through an anachronistic type of way, right? None of these things are really immediately useful to us. Whereas back in some village in China or Japan or something like that, during a certain time period, it may have been something that was very foremost on everybody's daily activity list, which is protecting yourselves from attack, bandits, whatever. We're divorced from all of those types of things. And if you look back through it, these things. So what happens now is we get these systems that are either geared towards a specific thing, or they're geared towards just kind of generalized things. And there's always arguments in between them. What we're doing here, and how we're talking about this, is our system of training. Taking somebody from zero, from knowing nothing, through progression, getting them acquainted with the weapon, with their body, and with the ins and outs of combat, that type of thing. You can apply that in any way you want. Okay, so in any fashion, for any rule set, all that. I've mentioned this before because it's becoming a greater and greater thing, is that we are not necessarily tied to any rule set. Our stuff is applicable across the board. You're always going to have to take some stuff out because we're putting in, again, kitchen sink stuff. So there's stuff like grappling and stuff like that, which will not be allowed in most competitions. So there you go. So that's where we're coming from with creating this stuff. Now, this is the way that we have organized the material. Now, you can organize it in any way. There's many different ways that you can take people from this, from knowing nothing to knowing something. And in modern times, and throughout the 20th century, and a little bit before, people have been taking specific things from specialized methods and combining them into what people think is a complete martial art. There are many arts which could claim to be complete, meaning you can use it. Pretty much gives you anything that you could use and anything that you might want to use in any situation, and that includes theatrical and performance. People tend to leave that stuff out of the martial arts because it's not real fighting. People are cooperative and everything like that. But it is simulating real fighting, and as we have mentioned in talks before, in modern times, at least in the United States, Canada, Europe, well, wherever, the place that you're probably most likely to receive an injury from a sword is in a play, because it's just there's just not that common outside of theatrical types of things. And yes, I know HEMA, but we don't. Us sword nuts don't occupy enough of the population to be statistically significant in that way. We're all very hobbyists. But anyway, so that's where we are. That's the purpose of this. So we're trying to give you overall skills that will be generally applicable to anything. So if you're doing any type of competition, TSL, light speed, whatever, there'll be valuable things here, because these are coming from real world arts that have already gone through some manner of mutation, separation, alteration, and that kind of thing. So they're in a sophisticated thing. I'm not one of these people that believes that the old ways were always ipso facto better than what we have now, because everything that is in continuous use gains sophistication and knowledge as it progresses. It doesn't lose it. So what we're doing now may be far more than people back in the day would have thought. Good example of this. Well, anyway, we'll get to that at the end with more questions and stuff like that. But the 4 pillars, where they sit, these should give you the basic skills that you need for free play, for free sparring, any type of engagement. If you are either knowledgeable, meaning you're coming from a different art, you've already have some experience in martial arts and movement, what have you, or if you're very, very dedicated and you practice every day and everything like that, to go through the entire 4 pillars and to reach Form 5 will take anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, something like that. Like I said, if you're very dedicated or you have previous knowledge, 6 months, you can rip through this stuff fairly quickly. We are going to be reopening up apprentices, and we're also going to have new things for students who can't devote as much time and energy to it as an apprentice, but still wants to be involved, still wants to learn. And we'll have all kinds of opportunities, and we'll do some workshops here online too, which will give a much more in-depth look at the stuff we're talking about in these public classes. So anyway, so that's your 4 pillars. Your 4 pillars basically, as the idea suggests, hold up everything there. When you get to Form 5, you start to get into what's called combinations. You basically start to look at the skills that you have in a novel way, so that you can better combine them and use these strategies in different ways against different opponents. Form 5 is divided into 2 in our system as well. Right? We have Xian, and then you have Jebso. Now, the way we've kind of partitioned it is that the Xian represents pretty much the idea of endless combination of the basics for all manner of purposes. Right? Again, kind of kitchen sink. Right? Jebso, on the other hand, is dealing much more directly with an opponent-to-opponent context, not worrying too much about group contexts, battlefield contexts, and stuff like that. So up to this point, these contexts have all been kind of in the background and been kind of, informing different things and making things a little bit more abstract. As you move into Form 5, that understanding should combine with the way that it's partitioned to give us more of a focus. One is on development of how things combine. The other one is how things are applied to a single opponent. Right? Now, the single opponent stuff is included in Shen, right? But it is not as well defined or as expansive as it will be in Gemso. So these are just the two things. So basically, if you are a fighter, if you are a sportsman, if you are somebody who wants to go out there and compete with other people, Gemso is probably your choice. If you're looking to teach, if you're looking to get more into and do deep dives and stuff like that, Shen is where you probably should give it a start. Anyway, we'll go over some concepts from those various ideas. And then I'll show you how they link up with the ideas that we've already talked about through the first four of our forms. Okay, so let's begin with footwork. So we have a limited number of footwork things that we do, strategies, techniques, and they're partitioned very separately and put in very simple terms in each of the forms, right? So if you have a taru, you have specific things. If you have shicho, you have specific things. Just using the first two. So we do shicho, which gives us some very, very important basics, right? We have our three-phase step, which allows us to abort steps. It allows us to make careful things. It allows us to bring our center together. Sometimes that's a way of regaining our balance. So if I'm moving around like this and I bring my foot in, the more stuff I bring in towards my center, the more stable I'm going to be. So there's that, and then you've got your hut slide like this. Okay, those two combine into your full step. All right. Okay, you get a very linear type of thing. You can always reorient and all of that, but it's pretty blocky, right angles, all that kind of thing, and it just depends on your terms. Now, you add to that the Form 2 stuff. Okay, so with my feet, now I'm adding my cross steps forward and backward. Right. Okay. And I'm adding my pivots. Right? Okay. I've got my lunge and I've got my hyper step that I can use to punctuate things. So I don't really have a whole ton of room here. I'll try to utilize it as much. But as we come in, we're gathering up here, and then whoops, you're out. Out to get that nice long reach. Okay. Now, if you're doing ASL FFE, then of course thrusting is forbidden. There's actually a lot of systems where thrusting is forbidden because these don't flex. So you can still use lunges, and lunges are still very, very, very useful. The lunge is a footwork concept. Okay, so lunge happens in your body. A thrust, right, which is often used with a lunge, is the blade work. Okay, you can still cut while doing lunge footwork. So if I lunge forward, but instead of pointing, right, I'm going to do either shim here, or I'm going to think about doing one of the, going from new moon to new moon here to half moon, right, and then using the sphere to make it a cut, like that. Haha! Watch those. Watch those thing. So now I've got all of this reach, but I was able to do a cut. Okay? So coming in there. Now for me, this is a very good strategy for somebody like me. I'm very tall. So if I get out to my full extension, I can very, very easily stay out of range of my opponent. The drawback to it is it's that much harder for me to recover from that stance. That stance is a very committed one, right? However, you must practice it so that it can be lively. Okay? If you cannot recover from that lunging step, then don't use it. Okay? But see, we're getting right down in there. Now this is where knee position, all of that's going to be very, very important. Remember, the knee can go beyond the toe as long as your upper body is at an equal to or a little bit greater angle than your lower leg. Okay? So, whereas this is not right, this is totally okay. Right? And that all has to do with where your body is holding most of the weight. As long as you keep your hip flexed, your body up, right, back straight, over here, then your weight's being borne by your hamstrings, by your glutes, all of these hip muscles, which are huge and very, very efficient. Then you can bounce off of them. Once you get good enough with that and you can get those deep stances, that will give you a kind of springy quality, right? Again, if you want to see this develop to its nth degree, just watch any sport fencers, okay? They make incredibly long lunges and bounce right back off of them, okay? And then notice where their musculature is most developed, okay? We'll just use that for homework, okay? But the idea that we can, and that's the other thing too, we're not necessarily having to move, right? If I get up here, I have to be able to at least move my body and move my target zone, right? I can parry here, okay? You're aiming for about, you want your thigh about parallel to the ground, right? If you're lunging up here, you're not getting much of that lunge kind of thing. This is more of just a forward stance, right? We want to make sure that we separate lunges from just forward stances, because a lunge is a much more committed position, much more aggressive position, well, much more aggressive footwork technique. You're covering a lot of distance very fast, very, very committed to it. But if you choose your time right, boom, that's your strategy. Okay? It's one of our basic ones, especially when you're dealing with one-on-one combat. The lunge is a basic footwork concept that needs to be in there. Okay? Just remember, blade always in front when we're going. So we don't want to do this, right? Because obviously, if the other person is throwing their attack at the same time, right, we're gonna get hit. You know, are we gonna hit them too? Maybe. These are lightsabers. That just means we both die. So it doesn't matter, right? We're trying not to get hit at all. Right? What we want to do is, as this, oops, I'm off frame. So we're here. Now you see here, I go like this. Now as I turn, now my blade is in front of me. I can defend myself. And then I move my, I'm not gonna hit things again. Then I move out like that. Same thing with when we do a thrust, okay? The thrust, we want to think about it coming out first. This is a little counterintuitive because we're used to pushing things, right? Meaning we put our base behind it and then we shift our body through it. Here, we've got to keep this thrust in front of us so that our body can move it through there. This is all about dealing with a foreign object in your hand, right? So when I thrust, I don't want to do this, right? In reality, we want it all to happen at the same time. But because of our nervous system, our motor system, and our, the basic size of our joints, we have to time it a little bit differently. Always think about thrusting with your arm first before going forward with your body, right? Now, as those events become closer and closer and closer, it will become imperceptible, right? You don't necessarily have to always go, ha, right? Because that, of course, telegraphs what you're doing, right? We want to make it smooth. We want to make it seamless, right? But we also don't want to arrive before we get this here, because then we don't have our body behind it, right? So I'm here, right? This extends, and then you kind of move through it. So that's the first little thing. Make sure that you're doing that there. Okay, more footwork. So we've got our pivots. Now, we have been moving on lines thus far. And if you go through our videos, when you get to Saber Ataru, you get the circular footsteps and all of that, but they're still really using single lines and jumping between single lines and all of that. Okay, so when we're doing Sundog and we're just moving forward here, you see we orient. If we do a circle walk, that single line is now a circle, but we're not veering off of it, right, in process. Okay. What we can do now is when we combine all of these footwork strategies together, is we can get things that are kind of combined, right? So the big one is the kind of side step up here like this that we see a lot here like that. One thing to keep in mind about this is this step is really a pivot. The key to this step is in the front leg, because we are going to be in more often than not in that particular position. We are going to be on this front leg, right? Now what I mean by this is I'm going to, if I want to bring this foot directly there, right, I can come in and go back out for the line, and that's what we've been doing before, okay? Or I can pivot on this foot, and see, I pivot. Here, I'll put this in the center. Okay, so this is in the center. You'll see it travel like that. You see? Okay. So if we're in here, there. Okay. The reason we don't want to think of it as just a straight step is because we can get bound up in here in this foot. Okay. So if I'm not thinking about pivoting on this foot and I step directly, now my hips are still facing this way. My opponent may be right here. And more than likely he will be if I'm stepping this way, because I'm trying to get around it. Or her. Okay? So if I'm here and I want to get to this position over here, okay? There. You see? Look what's happening with this foot. Okay? I go up. Right? And this is right there. Okay? To be done with the back foot, anything like that. Okay? Now, you can use those pivots in, back out, right? Using switches. all of these things can kind of be combined. Okay? You just make sure that they are predicated on what has come before, right? This is not then a new technique, right? As much as it is a sophistication of an old technique, right? Or a combination of two old techniques that are being combined in a novel way to create a particular thing. Now, you can also use, like circle walking is very, very similar. If I'm here and I get over to here, now you see here's my there. If I'm circling my opponent, you've seen Pirates of the Caribbean, right? They do something very similar where they do, it says, well, how's your footwork? Whatever. This is a common thing with sword play, okay, all over the world, because two people holding razor sharp pieces of metal tend to not want to get near each other, so we tend to size each other up. So this is one way that you can utilize that thing. Now the reason that works so well is because what I'm doing is I'm moving I'm keeping my center aligned with my opponent. Okay? Now, if I'm in a bind, I can use the portion of the bind right there to take this out and move there. And that's probably going to be the most you're going to use it, right? You're going to use it when you're not in contact with them, but when you're doing any type of play, you're in a phrase, right? If I'm here like this, it would seem simple for me to go this way, but what I can do is, since I have my way over here, is I can continue to go this way. Okay? And we move again off the line. But really, you're not moving off the line when you get to form 5. The idea when you get to this form, and to this level, right, which is the night level in our system, right? You are now thinking about the end goal of what's happening. Whereas, well, anyway, it's a change in thought where you're not limited to how things are just performed in front of you. Well, anyway, that one got away from me a little bit. Maybe it will rear its head again. So anyway, the point is this. When you get to Form 5, you are dealing with techniques that should now be very, very intuitive to you. You should not have to really think about what what specific things are doing what anymore, and now it's just a matter of combination, right? And you're testing kinds of stuff. Yeah. Right? All right. Yes, you can do freeform and that kind of thing, but it's better to stick to different things. So all of the sets and the forms in the Dulon that we have out, even in sections, just practice those and see how they combine the kind of different things. If you're moving through the system, don't move ahead until you understand the concepts. And obviously, if you're studying with one of us, make sure that you're asking us and all of that. Again, we will be starting up the achievement system here again very shortly, so stay tuned for that. Okay, anyway, let's see here. That's pretty good. First time. Do we have any particular questions from the peanut gallery, as it were? If not, I have some on the way, because I've gotten some. Why don't I start by answering those and then give people a chance to ask a question there. Okay, so one question that constantly comes up. This is going to be important for this kind of Form 5 discussion, because we're dealing with now putting the pressure onto our training. Let's remember that the art is training. Right? The conflict, the actual fight is its own animal, right? And if you're doing a rule set, then you have to follow those rules. If you are defending yourself, you have to deal with the environment, you have to deal with unpredictability, that kind of thing. And then if you're in any of the other contexts, there's going to be a whole slew of other things that you need to keep in mind. So, where is the optimal balance for your saber? That's a very, very subjective thing, right? For instance, I like my saber balanced about here, okay, which is about, and my hand is about here, so I would say I tend to like it about 3 to 4 inches in front of my hand. Right, up to about 6, I find very comfortable. So pretty much anywhere in here, I'm golden. I'm fine. Right. If it starts getting into the 9 range, now I'm starting to work a little bit more there. Now, again, the reason that probably is true for me is because I do not train with weapons that have that forward balance, right? Scimitars and that kind of thing. But there you go. The saber itself, since it's a straight blade, is going to be pretty straightforward as far as balance goes. It's going to be hilt versus here. Now, what can you do to alter this? A couple of things. Use a different grade of blade, right? So if you use a heavy grade blade, that's going to change the blade presence. It's going to bring the blade. It's going to bring the balance point out here like this more, but it's also going to add overall weight to the whole weapon. Keep that in mind. I mean, all of these things are going to add overall weight to the whole weapon, but since this is long, it's going to kind of distribute it, right? Now, that's kind of good because it doesn't put it all in one place. And then we get to the next idea, which is the pommel. Now, that's the whole concept behind the saber, right? If you've seen the video I did on it a few weeks ago, you can put little weights onto that to make this pommel heavier. It is made of brass, so it is heavier than an aluminum pommel of the same shape. That gives me a very nice balance as it's empty, right? One which I prefer. If I put all of these in there, it'll bring it to about there. Right? Put all the weights in there, bring them up to about there. And some people like it balanced at the hand. I would advise, like I said, this is all subjective, but I do advise against balancing the saber right at your hilt or right at the hand, because you're going to be wasting a lot of energy with your if you're holding it in the typical way and you're doing this, you're going to waste a lot of energy wielding it because you're not getting any mechanical advantage from gravity, right? When I'm just spinning here, most of it is gravity. So what I do is I just let it go, and it kind of goes around here. There, I just loosen up or turn, right? There. Now, that doesn't mean I'm ever out of control of the saber. If I get to here and somebody hits it, all I do is squeeze, and I've still got a good firm grip on it. Right? Again, anywhere from handshake to hammer grip is acceptable. Right? Where you put this finger doesn't matter too much, other than ergonomically. And ergonomically speaking, keeping it up here around the first finger, I like to just bring it on top here, so that if I can, I push down on top of my finger, or I push into the saber. If I have my fingers overlapped at all, when I squeeze my hand to gain a little bit of extra rigidity, I'm going to be pinching my fingers, which is going to stop me from squeezing as hard as I want to. So I generally try to keep my fingers out of the way of each other. Right? That doesn't necessarily mean that you want a completely loose grip. You don't want to let go like this. But I've said that many, many times, so we won't go into that. So that's the answer there. If you get a balance point that you like. If you don't have one that you like, you can try changing the blade, lighter or heavier. You can also change pommel, or you can get a hilt that balances differently. But for your regular hilt, if you have a hollow pommel, you can place things in there which are heavier or what have you, like wrapping some coins in a piece of paper and taping it inside the thing might give you some extra weight. Caveat: as the pommel gets heavier, you start getting it starts getting, the whole weapon starts getting heavier, and it starts getting harder to move, because this is now providing more inertia than it had before. So weighting the pommel or getting heavier pommels is a common way to do it. It has its drawbacks. Again, it's all going to be what you're comfortable with. Okay. Nothing new there. And now, okay, so the next question is something a little bit more conceptual, but it ties into what we're doing here, which is we're kind of mixing the styles and all that. Mixed martial arts is big. All that. The question is about Jeet Kune Do. Now, Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's method that he was working on. I don't believe he finished it. He never published a book. The book that's out, which is called Jeet Kune Do, is his collected notes and stuff. But I don't believe he had anything that was ready for publication or anything like that. And I believe the system was still being formed at the time of his death. That being said, it's very famous. It has been carried on by several different schools, several different people, students of his, all that. So it's out there, and its claim to fame is it is keeping the useful and discarding the useless, and trimming everything down, and not being closed off to other arts and all that kind of stuff. And that's a nice attitude. What's our attitude here? We're taking things from different arts. We're taking things. We don't quite go as far as saying that there are things that are useless, because at the very least, something that isn't mechanically bad for you and isn't injurious to you is probably giving you some sort of cardio benefit or just health or movement benefit. So we don't really say things are. We have a hard time throwing things out, just because it's like, is this useless? No, there are some things that we don't bother doing. That's true. But anyway, now Jeet Kune Do, it is one of these systems that's supposed to take things from different arts. It is not the first system to do this, nor is it the only system doing it now, nor is it necessarily all that odd. Many martial arts styles, at least their origin stories, say that they're some combination of techniques. A person looks and says, "Oh, I'm going to add some things that are missing from my art." Yada yada, that kind of thing. In my own art, Ma Fengtu added Baji, Fanzi, and Choujiao to his Piqua to create Ma Shi Tong Bei. There's a lot of this going on, right? It's not as a thing, and it seems to be an intuitive thing that we like to do. Let's not waste our time with this, and instead focus on this, because this is what will become useful, or what have you. That's all well and good, right? That attitude we like. We like accepting all arts and taking things from different places and evolving and all that. Where it can get a little tricky is that, again, it's that useless thing. Are the people who are deeming these things useless fairly deeming them useless? Are they even qualified? Who is qualified to say what is useless without use? You can't argue specific claims, right? I claim this exercise does this. Okay, well, I refute that claim by this. Fine and dandy. We're good. Right. The other things are subjective, so it's like, who knows, right? But anyway, so it's in the discarding that we usually see the definitions of these things kind of crystallize. Not in what they're including, if that makes any sense. But we tend to tell people to include as much as they can, But we all have limited time too, so train what is most useful to you. All right, let's see what we got. So the question here is, if you have multiple sabers, is there more utility in trying to standardize their balance points, or having a blade-heavy, pommel-heavy sabers to explore different things on? All up to you, I guess. From a weapons background standpoint, every weapon you pick up is a little bit different. And I see no difference in sabers. So again, if you're just thinking ballpark, ballpark will get you a long way. But I think there's also a lot of myths over these little minute details, that they're end-all, be-all kind of things. In my opinion, if a balance point moving a couple inches around completely destroys your ability to use that weapon, that may be more of a problem with your training than the weapon. I think most of us who've done weapons have used weapons that we just hated, right? This thing sucks. It doesn't feel good. It's too heavy, or it's too light, or what have you. I do not like using this kind of thing. Yet, we still were able to use it. You're not completely helpless, in any of this stuff. Will moving the balance point this much change your technique? I doubt it. Maybe, but that does not seem like a significant change in the way things are going. It may feel a little different to the person doing it, but I don't think it would have that great of an effect on it. I've never been able to see that. And we use lots of, people switch sabers all the time without any apparent problem. So I don't necessarily think that the balance point is that big a deal, at least in sabers, because most of these weapons weigh about the same, which is about 1.5 to 2 pounds. Some of them weigh more. I, I know there's a conversation I was in with some sort of rapier saber, which without a blade weighed 7 pounds or 4 pounds, and then with a blade weighed 7. It was ridiculous. It was way too heavy. Probably too much metal on the thing. But anyway, so yeah, so ours are light compared to weapons. That gives us a lot of play, right? I can use this as a two-handed weapon. Easy because of the length, right? But I don't need this hand here to use this weapon. I can easily wield it one-handed as well. Zero problem. And again, that's one of the cool things we like about lightsaber, is that it can be anything, anything that you want. Yeah, so there you go. All right, what do we got? Let me see. So, okay, we got 3 questions here. Are any martial arts books you'd recommend that are applicable to saber training combat? Books are useful in a reference sense. I think it's very difficult to learn from a book. So I just recommend reading and exploring a lot of them. I don't necessarily recommend a specific one. I have favorites, but they're generally based on my own tastes and my own preferences and that kind of thing. If you want a kung fu book, I'll give you a kung fu book. If you want a fencing book, I'll give you another book. But definitely check some out. Anything by Aldo Nadi is great in a general sense, for general kind of sword play. Yes, I'm having a trouble bringing up things. But anyway, yeah, read a lot. It's good. Okay, is there ever an instance where you thrust while stepping with the non-dominant foot? So if you were going to be crossed, yeah, I guess you could. More than likely, you wouldn't be in that situation. Where you can go into a forward stance, right, and thrust like that. But the whole idea, the whole idea of the lunge is you're making yourself as long as you can, and going like this here, you can't do that. So I do not consider that a lunge, right? Now, also, if I'm in a lunge position here, way out like this, and I go here, right, that becomes much more difficult a position because of the angle of this foot. It's something that we do a lot in barehanded, but when you have an apparatus, it's kind of like that. But, like I said, you can go into a forward stance and thrust forward, right, like that. And that will come in much more when you're in close. So, you can imagine maybe being in a bind. I capture the person's weapon over here. My tip is set right there. I step through and just run them through. So that would be a possibility on that sense. Okay, so crossing the feet. I've been taught that crossing the feet is a footwork no-no. Yes, it is. But crossing the feet does not mean I'm not necessarily going to step across like that in relation to my opponent. Okay? What it means is that I'm not going to cross my legs. Okay? So if I'm here like this and I'm doing a circle walk like this, okay, my legs are not crossed. See? I can go right between them. Right? What I am is I'm turned. And that's the whole purpose of that type of footwork. Okay? It's it's based on our spinning footwork here, which has its pivoting aspect of it. Okay? But if I'm standing here like this, and I have my feet like this, right? Now I am crossed. Okay? You see? There's no space there, and if I bring this foot forward, it's right there. Okay? And I don't want to get that. Okay? So, right? It's just another one of these things where people will intuitively go, you're crossing your feet. No, I'm not. Right? If you think I am, go ahead and try to capitalize on it, and then we can talk. But crossing the feet really means that, right? You're crossing your legs. And actually, it would be more accurate to say you don't cross your knees, right? So you don't bring your leg so far over that your knees change position, right? And that's in relation to your back foot here. If I turn this foot, now this position becomes fine, right? Because I have my base that's going this way, and this foot's just turned here. You just got to make sure that that foot is void, right? You're not putting any weight on it when it's twisted up like that. You're here, you pour the weight into it, and then you go. Okay. When should you start using exotics like Saber staff or dual blades? So the Saber staff and all of that, and there's lots of people that have incorporated these things into their rule sets and all that kind of thing. The Saber staff isn't that fantastic a weapon. It's not got a really great range of techniques or things that you can do or anything. And we find it infuriating to spar with, because if the other person knows even a little bit of how to get kind of past that first blade, you're getting hilt strikes all the time. That's just me. If you like it, great. But as far as a training thing, as a training tool, the Saber staff is okay, right? Because it makes you expand your awareness and all that. So we have a Saber staff set up for Shicho so that people can use it, and you kind of get that in there. Dual sabers, Jarkai, whatever. I really recommend you get good with one before you try to. A lot of times what will happen with people who prematurely try to do two sabers is they're still fighting with one, but now they have an extra one in their hand. So that kind of limits them in a little bit of a way there. I would not be able to give you a time, when should you do this, unless I knew what your training regimen was and all of that. In our system, we tend to hold that off until people get a feel for a weapon for a long time. So there's that. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Facebook, I don't see anything more. I'll just hit that link there. And I believe I hit it up here. Yeah, I think that's the questions we have so far there. I don't see any on the stream there, so okay. I guess we are winding down here. So, again, the whole idea today is that those 4 pillars, those 4 things that we have, that we show, we learn those very, very well, because just like music, just like anything like that, this is going to be your notes, your quanta that you put in these things and combine them and recombine them, and, find novel ways of doing it. And you kind of, one thing that people should understand, especially when they're starting out, is that although everything seems new and everything is there's so much out there, it's you can have intuitive moments where you figure something out on your own, or you think of something that's ultimately convincing to you. Ask your teacher. Ask people who have done it before, because a lot of us have already gone through all of this stuff. There's no reason that you have to reinvent the wheel. Some lessons are hard learned, and some of those can, if I tell you about it, you can avoid, that whole thing. And we try to do that as you go. So remember, try to stay humble in your training. Remember, as you're starting out, there is more to know out there than you can forget. So then so it's a tough, it's an uphill battle. It never becomes a downhill battle. But for some of us, that's what kind of attracts us to it. We got one last question here. What are your thoughts on using kata as meditation? I think you can use anything as meditation. You can use that. It depends on what you mean by meditation. If you mean just a distraction of your mind, focusing on something, sure, absolutely. If you mean like there are certain types of meditation it would not fit into, but I don't think we're talking about that. But anyway, whatever you do, just keep training. That's what we got to do. Yes, so there we go. We will see you next week. Try to come up with a good little activity for us, kind of in this vein, and we can see where we go from there. So, until next time, we will make sure everybody's safe and healthy out there. I hope everybody is kind of staying sane and getting there. We will be here all week and into next week and all that. So remember, we got Taiji on Tuesdays. We got Kung Fu on Thursdays. We've got Sword Lab on Wednesdays. And, of course, Saber Academy today. And yes, keep an eye out for a Zoom workshop. We'll be doing some stuff there. So if people want to get in and have an actual closed class with me, and we'll be going over something in great detail, we're going to be doing that. Okay, so we'll see everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. Patience, practice, perseverance. Happy sabering.